Okay, man, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. Now, come on, now crank this motherfucker up.
Break it down like this.
Hello, Internet. Gino, that's Gino here again with another episode of Deep Listens, and today we are talking about Final Fantasy VI. Once again, we have rejoined Terra, Locke, Edgar, and the gang to discuss everything. We'll see how far we get. We might get up to Thamasa, we might get up to the floating continent, but we are back. We have to play this game for the ranking of fantasies. We have to learn about Final Fantasy VI, the one that people have told me is the one that might beat out 9 at the top of our list. It's the candidate, it's the fighter, it's the prize fighter. And joining me, as always, on this ill-advised adventure of ours, Chris ZombiePie Redacted. Hello.
I want the audience to say I've got no horse in this race. That's why I, right here, have a whiteboard in which on one side it reads times in which Gino will unfavorably compare Final Fantasy VI to Final Fantasy IX. And then on the other side it says times in which Jeff compares Final Fantasy VI favorably to Final Fantasy IX. I've got my markers ready, and I'm ready to be the accountant of this dick measuring contest between
Excellent.
the two of you.
And that shout out to Jeff Rude. Hello, Jeff. Also here.
Hi, I'm here. It's nice to be talking to you gentlemen again. A thing about friendships with friends, with real friends, is, you can enjoy yourselves and talk some yang, but friends can also be people who hold you accountable for you shit. And, it is in that spirit that I'd like to join and talk about Final Fantasy VI, a game that has some things that are worth discussing.
Excellent.
And owning my shit.
So before we get into Final Fantasy VI, we have our nonsense segments. But before ZP, you get into that, let me do the plugs, because I have a feeling once we stop doing the plugs, things
It will be
might
hard
get
for
off
you
the
to
rail.
get back on
Yes,
task.
exactly. So reminder, you can get in touch with the show at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have our comment sections and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. That is the email address. You can also support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens, which will get you access to our Discord, where you can talk with the host of the show. And now, if I remember correctly, Off the Deep Ends is letting people who are in the Discord suggest games for y'all to play.
Right.
Is this the case?
Jeff, our pitch. Yes, it is indeed that Pinguino Gino Grieco. That is Jeff, I, and our fellow co-host Braden, have given the Deep Listens, or people out there on the interwebs. Gino told us that 100 of you are possibly listening to this podcast
or
on
more.
the RSS feed. There are about 20 of you who listen to this on YouTube. We want to double the Deep Listens community on the Patreon and Discord. It's just $1 per month, $12 for this wonderful entertainment that you're getting usually once a week. And Jeff
Sometimes
and I
more.
have agreed that if you donate $1 per month, we'll let you pick a game for our little side dealio. And now we've got a dollar for dollar challenge, or donation incentive. Jeff, what's our donation incentive?
What was so I guess my
We need
small
the
win.
number from the boss man, but I don't think he feels comfortable saying it. We're going to
Look.
double our audience.
Here's my small thing that I'm going to add, and then you can tack on the actual dark deed. Every $100 threshold that this Patreon hits, which is to say once we raised $100 a month and then up to $200, for each one of those little things we hit, I will record myself doing an RPG karaoke number and post it either exclusively to people who are signed up or on YouTube. I'm not quite sure how, but it will go up. And I'm starting with the end theme from Chrono Cross. I'll do it in Japanese and English. I'll do both. I
So
may
you will
even,
just
I'll dress up. I'll do makeup. I'll do anything. I'll dress up as that blonde gal from the end of Chrono Cross and record myself doing that karaoke number. That's the $100. So get your asses in there. Get your friends. Tell them you want to see Jeff as a pretty lady.
I love learning about these things live when we're recording. That's the best time for me to learn about these incentives.
The easier, more realistic one is if we are able to double the total number of subscribers before the end of the year of our Lord, 2022. Should we do this, Jeff has agreed to formally redact his normal veto powers against... I almost threw up in my mouth. Oh God. Unlimited Saga. We'll play it. What's the number we need to get to, Gino, before the end of 2022?
Let's say 30. Let's say 30 patrons.
Okay, 30. So yes, the possibly 100 of you on the RSS feed, it's $1 a month.
And tell your friends. Tell your friends about this nonsense. And speaking of nonsense,
one of the worst games ever made.
Byzantine. I would play Unlimited Saga with you. I would get in on this dark blood pact.
Oh God, Gino, one of these
wade into the
weird.
slop. So, ZP, just to give folks a sample of the sort of high quality content we create on the Deep Listens podcast and in the Deep Listens series of Twitch channels that we all seem to run. In the spirit of giving, you sent me a Christmas gift this year, which was a scented candle that smells of New Jersey. And I felt that I should return the favor and give you an equally delightful gift.
I want to point out, I asked Gino, is this not suitable for work? And he says, of course not. I have class.
Yes, I would never send something that you could not receive at work. So you have two gifts. Why don't you open the first one?
So there's a small box-like, cube-like one, and there's one that says listed 0.8 pounds.
Okay, so the one that seems maybe like a bag,
yes,
that seems looser, open that one first.
Okay. And for clarification, I have not wavered based off of this series. I should probably get scissors. No, I'm going to use my teeth.
Excellent. That's good, because to set the table here.
Hey, this smells.
I thought that you for Christmas,
Jesus Christ.
For Christmas this year, you should have a feast. You should have a truly delicious, scrumptious feast. And so I've sent you two delicious foods
Gino.
To give you that, at home. I know sometimes folks can't get home for the holidays. They can't enjoy Ma's cooking.
Should I read what the first one is?
Yes. So please tell us.
It is Brotch's candy corn, but it is flavored to turkey dinner plus apple pie and coffee candy corn. We've got 4 listed flavors. One is listed green beans. The second is listed as roasted turkey. The third is cranberry sauce, and the final one, stuffing.
And
should I
apple
eat this
pie,
or
right?
should I open the other one? Yeah, there's apple pie.
Let's eat. Let's go one at a time here. So one of each of the candy corns.
I got you something legitimately nice.
You didn't know it was nice.
Okay, so I got a green one. It's green beans. Okay, I fucking hate candy corn so much.
I'm sure that the green bean flavor will improve the texture of the candy corn.
I'm right there with you. Fuck candy corn. It's awful.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's bad. Green bean is bad. Oh God, Jesus. Okay, so the green bean tastes like the water in a can of green beans. It appears that the flavors can rub off on each other. So is green bean juice and a little bit of like turkey brine because it rubbed up against the turkey.
I'm glad that the flavors are not isolated.
Okay, let's eat turkey. Or it's either turkey stuffing or... Yeah, I think it's turkey or stuffing.
I imagine these all have really appetizing, like, brown colors.
Yeah, it's brown color.
Yum. Yum, yum. That's good eating.
Oh, yeah.
That's
coffee?
Oh, fuck.
It's coffee. It's coffee.
Coffee? Coffee was not one of the advertised flavors.
It was on the list. Okay, I've got. Oh, okay. Let's see this one.
It's a scrumptious meal in a bag.
This is definitely turkey. Okay, this is much more pleasant than the green bean.
Okay,
It's
good.
a very Lutheran thing. Just like eat an enormous meal and then have
No,
coffee
it's
at the
not.
end.
Oh, there's an awful aftertaste.
I can't believe that this candy flavored like meat isn't good.
I want cranberry sauce.
Maybe that's how you're supposed to eat it. You're supposed to have the turkey with the cranberry sauce. Maybe that improves it.
Okay, actually, cranberry sauce tastes fine.
Yeah, that seems like a replicable flavor.
This seems like a decent flavor.
They could have put cranberries in
All
it.
right, time for apple pie.
Yeah, dessert. Time for dessert.
It's weird to him because he's only eaten like 4 apples his whole life. We
That's
heard
true.
3 of them on the last recording.
It tastes like apple flavored medicine. Oh God. I'm opening the other one now. Fuck you.
Okay, so what was the rating of this bounty?
-5. -5 stars.
You would not, but the cranberry seemed like
No.
it was at least like a 3. out of
Okay, you
5.
want me to itemize this list?
Yes, please.
Green beans -5, roasted turkey 0, cranberry sauce like 3, stuffing 0, apple pie 2.
Excellent. Thank you. Now, I know
this in
you're.
the trash. I was gonna think about subjecting my friends and family to this at the Christmas party that I'm gonna go to. No, they don't deserve this pain.
Do it. But also, that's a fairly standard meal, but I thought you deserved.
Oh fucking Jesus!
I thought you deserved a great meal, a truly outstanding standalone. And as an Italian, a traditional Christmas dinner is not complete without seafood.
Okay. Oh God, it's saran wrapped.
Excellent. So I thought I would get you something extra special to share my
Individually
family
wrapped.
tradition to you. ZP, can you read what is in front of you?
They are peppermint mints flavored to lobster.
With butter.
Fuck.
What does it say on the can? What does it say on the container?
Lobster coated in butter. Individually wrapped, artificially flavored.
I think artificially flavored is that's probably more comforting than if it was
All the
naturally
candy
flavored
from,
in this
like,
case.
Tales from Off-Peak City, basically, you've just mailed him. Like,
It was a
Okay.
So I saw a ham flavored candy. I saw a lot of options. There was
Oh, it smells like cat food.
finally
Ah,
you get-
Jesus.
you get to eat the cat food you've always begged to eat.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
some
Do I have
fucked
to
up
eat
shit.
this?
Try one. Maybe it's good. I don't know.
Yeah, it tastes like cat food.
Why do you know?
That tasted
Don't
like
yuck
cat
and
food,
yum.
and now it's stuck in my mouth. The flavor won't go away. Flavor won't go away.
Eat the candy.
Nope. Spit it out. That's a -5.
Did it taste like buttery lobster?
Tasted like cat food.
No, you need to articulate in a way that someone who hasn't eaten cat food can understand.
It tastes like processed seafood with chemicals and artificial butter. Like, I can't believe it's not butter, but it's very clearly I can't believe it's not butter.
Okay.
Just
It's
margarine
like
powder.
You could
Oh, yeah,
believe
it's
it
like
wasn't
margarine
butter.
powder, or my favorite off-brand. I can't believe it's not butter. Butter ? I saw that once at a dollar store. I almost
Incredible.
bought it, but I was fearful it would give me cancer.
It's got some Toads cream chip beef, corned beef hash combo
Oh,
can
God,
energy.
Jesus. Okay.
Well,
Wow.
Merry Christmas to all.
Okay. Well, Gino, this will be considered when the great debate happens. I will consider this as whatever makes you unhappy.
ZP will remember this. It's like we've made a choice in a Telltale game.
I did actually have something to spring on you, but you didn't just poison the well. You fucking shat in it too and spread cholera, like a character we'll talk about later.
That's true. And with that excellent transition, let's start talking about you heard the Final Fantasy VI horn.
That is not the Final Fantasy VI horn. That's the Jeff has a thing horn.
Oh.
Woohoo! It's crazy time, baby. We're doing something dumb over here. I bought a nightmare vessel. I'm going to tell you about it. I'm holding in my hand a can, believe it or not. It's from a store I went to about a month ago. I saw it and I said, this sounds perfect for a show about Final Fantasy. I'm holding in my hand a can that says C4 Energy Starburst Strawberry Flavor Superhuman Performance. It's got carnosine. It's got beta power. It's got 200 milligrams of caffeine. It is a pink and yellow gross looking can. And I'm going to have some right now.
Okay.
It has no color. It's completely clear. It smells like a seltzer water. That's about it. It smells like a really vague seltzer.
Now we're going to
Speaking of Final Fantasy VI.
We're going to need a new horn for the Final Fantasy VI horn, I guess. Oh, well.
Huh. That...
Does it taste okay?
Does
it taste like a Starburst?
There's a likeness of a pink Starburst in there. It's not 1-to-1, but it's surprisingly close. I'm probably going to drink this whole thing.
Good. Would you recommend this thing? Well, I guess we'll see how you feel later on.
200 milligrams of caffeine later. We'll see how I feel. I would buy this for $1. I don't buy energy drinks, but
did you buy it for $1?
I think so.
Okay, good.
I mean, it says superhuman performance right on the front. Also related to Final Fantasy VI, I guess. So
that's true. If you had told me I paid $10 for this, but I would buy it for $1, that's a different review. All right. Well, welcome to our family table. We've got everything. We've got a delicious turkey dinner via candy corn. We've got a delicious buttery lobster via hard candy, and we've got dessert, which appears to be Starbursts in a can, juiced up, and we're ready to go. We're ready to discuss Final Fantasy VI. So when we last left our intrepid heroes, they had gone down a river, and then were split up into three parties: Terra, Sabin, and Locke. Sabin basically floated downriver. Terra stayed on a raft with her buddies, and Locke got split off from the team. So each of us kind of took a different place to, start off, but I think the easiest way to describe this is probably go Terra, then probably Sabin, then probably Locke, because Locke's the shortest. Or Terra's the shortest. Terra's the
shortest. I did Terra, Locke, Sabin. Sabin's is way more involved than all of the other two combined, which took me by surprise.
And
also, fuck you, Shadow. You left my party after the second battle. It was supposed to be a 1 in 16 chance, not a motherfucking coin flip. You fucking coward. Fuck you.
So we'll get to that in a second. Terra. The easiest one, you have Bannon, you have Edgar, you have Terra. Like, you've got a real party, and you basically just get left right about at the entrance to Narsh, and you just need to walk to Narsh.
Yeah. Not only do you have a party, you have like an unbeatable party because Bannon's just got infinite party heal juice.
Yep.
So it's like a plot chunk, basically.
One thing about this is, I forgot to mention this last time. There is a part in this river raft sequence where with Bannon, basically you have infinite health, where however much you want. There's an option where the river forks, right? You can go left or right, and if you go right, or I think it's up, you basically loop around. And I want to say that I was there for about 30 to 40 minutes just doing that loop, infinitely grinding my characters.
Yeah.
And as a result, I broke the economy for, I want to say, a solid third of the game.
Sweet.
So there's that. Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing with Terra's route is you really start to learn more about Terra as a character. She has amnesia, obviously, but we start to get the inklings that there's something up with Terra as a person, as a source of,
Magic.
how the characters are like, wow, she's got magic. Oh my God, we haven't seen magic ever.
Yeah.
So
And even with like Bannon, his command is like prayer. It's not an actual magical command, even though it might seem like that in practice.
yes. So you just basically get her to Narsh, and then it jumps to one of the other parties. We can go over Locke next, because his is also quite short. He is in South Figaro. His mission is basically to steal the clothes of merchants and soldiers so that he can navigate. There's like this mechanic of NPCs reacting to you differently depending on what you're wearing. And his goal is to escape South Figaro and get up to Narsh. But in order to do so, you need to find out that South Figaro has been betrayed to the Empire by a rich dude who was totally plotting to betray them to the Empire. And you rescue Celis, one of the generals of the Gestalian Empire, who has decided to turncoat and join the Returners. So she joins your party.
Yeah, this section is sometimes labeled as a stealth sequence. It's not
really.
It's an adventure sequence basically. Yeah. It's a item chain kind of thing.
The only real punishment for not treating it like a serious stealth sequence is that those magic tech armors can basically serve your ass on a silver platter. But
because you're one character alone.
Other than that, it's not that big of a deal. Celis is an interesting character. I like Celis as a character. I think that she has a pretty well realized and easy to follow character arc. I like it when we learn more about her later, but we'll eventually get to it. There's something to be said about these characters in each of their classes, and I put that in generous quotations like air marks, literally.
Yeah, so for right now, she is a knight. She wears heavy armor, and her ability is runic, which allows her to become basically a magic magnet. Any spells that are cast while she's used runic, she will absorb and turn into MP.
There's like a weird timing element to that, though. You have to kind of like time when you select runic and execute it, and I just was never good at that.
Yeah, it's not turned on until her animation, where she kind of flashes for a second, and then until it's her turn again after that, and she takes another action, it's engaged. Though it will only attract the first spell. So if, say for example, you cast a cure spell, she will absorb that. She absorbs your own magics too. And then if an enemy casts a spell after your cure spell, that will go through. So you need to be a little bit careful when Celis is using runic that you don't accidentally trip it.
You don't really have to worry about that scenario until much later. But that said, it's very useful, as we will talk about later, for certain and specific boss fights.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's very fiddly and can be very frustrating to use in everyday combat.
Yeah, there are very specific battles where Celis just owns them, and then there are other battles where she's basically just a character who can equip swords and heavy armor. And she can use magic. She is one of the only characters that just comes with magic.
Yeah, a pretty good caster.
Did y'all take the time to get the ribbon hidden in this environment?
I think I did. Yes.
I did.
I'm playing this blind. Didn't realize there was a ribbon in there. Don't know if I ever knew that.
There's a lot of weird secrets in especially the interior environments. If you get too far into the game, you can't pick them up ever again. For reasons.
Yeah, in South Figaro, once you get to the basement area to kind of escape, there are a few like hidden doors and secret pathways that you can do to get treasure chests, and one of them leads to a ribbon. So if you're not using a guide, you'd probably miss it.
Fun.
And right after you get Celis, you kind of start walking your way to Narsh, and that forces you to go through a crappy cave. And in that crappy cave, you run into one of the first bosses that kind of teaches you how to use Runic.
Yeah, but the problem is that this boss, which is Tunnel Armor, has a tendency to say, fuck it, I'm just going to use Drill 5 times in a row, eat my ass, and then it's like my characters are dead.
Yeah, it's kind of tough at this point for the non-Terra parties, because you just have 2 characters, and the game hasn't opened up too much yet, so healing can be difficult. At least Locke has Celes, and Celes can heal. But yeah, you can sometimes get screwed against.
You
the
can't really
armor.
predict. So yes, I did die on this battle the first time, but I also got lucky in that this was one of the few times in which, when Locke went into critical health, I got him to perform Mirage Dive, his desperation attack, and it killed it in one attack after everything was said and done. So that was cool. The desperation abilities or desperation attacks are interesting. I try to avoid needing to rely on them because it's a very press your luck thing. But yes, I was able to beat this boss because Locke went into low health and he popped off his ability.
Well, Jeff, have you ever seen the desperation attacks playing through this game? I have never before.
Yeah, I
didn't even know they existed until someone told me.
I can tell you in the times I've played through this, not all the way through because I've never done that, and the times I've touched this game in my adult life, I've never deliberately done one. That's not to say I never accidentally did one as like a teen fucking around with this game, but yeah, I don't know, but probably not. Certainly never by intention.
So it's interesting because the Desperation Attacks is kind of the first limit break style move in the Final Fantasy series. You get this special move when your characters are low on HP, and it will randomly happen if you just pick attack. Instead of doing their regular attack, they'll do this super move that does extra damage. But you can't control it. It just happens when you're low on HP and you select attack. So it is the most...
think that...
random.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's the most random of the limit breaks. It's one of the least powerful of like the limit break systems. It's not that mechanic, there's not much to it other than being low on HP. But it's interesting to see what it spawned in subsequent games.
I preferred it to auto trance because fuck that mechanic. Anyways, I just feel like that there was an element to it that I appreciate, that they don't just pop off their abilities for like the first 20 or 30 seconds of the battle. Because let's be honest, even though we enjoy the limit breaks in 7 and 8, they break those games sideways in different ways. And then you stop using, the actual commands that the developers want you to use, like magic and summons and items. So I think that there's a give or take. There are so many mechanics here they didn't want to put in something that's completely busted like the limit break system in 8.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting to see it as just a super attack. Like it just does, 2-3 times or 4 times as much damage as a regular attack would, as opposed to the kind of game-changing mechanic it is in every other instance. So
then we got Sabin.
Then we got Sabin's, who's got like an entire side story. So Sabin winds up on a completely different continent than the other 2 characters because he got washed out to sea. You can immediately, as you alluded to, ZP, hire Shadow.
No, you just talk to him at this point. You don't have to pay for him. It's the second time after the Phantom Train that you have to pay for him if you want him, but you have to have a cast of 3 characters.
Yeah, so he's one of the, he joins your party temporarily, but as you said, ZP, he can leave just randomly. Be like, after this fight, fuck off, and then decide not to support you anymore.
Which let's
sucks.
Just say needing to do the Phantom Train sequence with 2 characters is a bummer.
Yes, that's... yeah, I don't know if that's ever happened to me.
Happened to me. He left before the Phantom Train. I killed the Phantom Train with
apparently
Sabin
he's designed
Cyan.
to stay with your party once you reach the Phantom Train, but yeah, every battle or every victory that you get, there's a 1 in 16 chance that he just runs away. Fucks off.
Yeah, he pieced out, I think, after beating Kefka.
Ooh,
one
right.
of those
And
little
there
battles.
are forced encounters, which makes his programming especially rough.
Yeah, so
Yeah, it would have been one thing if, like, oh, okay, I can just run away from all of these encounters, which is antithetical to, like, the innate design and appeal of the mechanics of JRPGs. But if I could just run away from every encounter and just keep them, but then there are, like, required fights, especially when you get to the Imperial camp, which just stacks the deck against you.
Yeah. So for Sabin's scenario, you get to an Imperial camp. They are sieging the kingdom of Doma, which is where Cyan the samurai is based. They are trying to break through into Doma, but the kind of general who's in charge of this attack is General Leo, who is a generally honorable guy. So he's just setting up for a long-term siege, which is not, sieges are not pleasant at all. It's not necessarily, there's no honorable way to kill hundreds of people, which is what General Leo is setting about doing, but he is, the traditionally honorable general figure. Like, look, there's a right way to murder all of these people, and we need to do it that way. I care about my soldiers. I know their names. And he gets recalled back to whatever the Gestalian Empire home base is. Vesper, I think, is the name of the city. He gets recalled, which leaves all of his troops in Kefka's command. And as soon as he leaves, Kefka just puts poison in the water supply and poisons the entire country, or the entire city, with the exception of Cyan, because he, I guess, didn't have water that day. Which leads to an event in the castle.
Intermittent fasting or something.
Jeff, how did you feel about this encounter?
The sequence of Cyan returning to the castle and finding his family.
That and Kefka this is the first mascot. This is kind of the first real exposure we get to Kefka.
Yeah. Like, he... Okay, ZP, get your whiteboard out.
I got it. Say it.
I'm not going to make that hard of a move.
He's better than Kuja. Say it.
Yeah, I don't have to say it that way. Like, I admire the games in this series, which I guess off the top of my head are 6, 7, and 10, certainly, and I guess 8 kind of, that just show you your primary antagonist, like, right off the bat, pretty much.
Right.
Like, the stakes are very clear. That's not me targeting 9. That's targeting, like, several games in the series that, like, don't do that. The thing, I think you talked about at the first recording, like, with Kefka, is the way they build on him as your primary antagonist is very... It's a slow burn. He's like a shitty clown. He looks like a joke. It's like, if you playing this for the first time in 1994, it'd be pretty easy to be like, oh, it's like, Ultros and Kefka and all these bad guys. And it's like, now they're kind of not even in the same tier. But early on in this game, they're kind of treated the same. They're just kind of these, like, joke antagonists. They're not all that far removed from, like, Gilgamesh and 5.
Except that they start Kefka off as, like, look, he is one of these generals. He is one of many that we've seen so far. He's the third we've seen.
Yeah. There's no reason why, Leo at this point could not be elevated into, I guess, the spot that Kefka kind of goes into.
They just make clear he's a sadistic monster in a way that the other ones aren't. But he's also a joke. He's a clown. Like,
he's a goober.
Yeah, like, you try to fight him shortly after this, and he runs away from every battle after you hit him once.
So, yeah, I think it's one of the best jobs that any of the games in this series has ever done.
Yeah.
Of, like, getting your antagonist in there and being like, oh, he sucks.
Yeah.
Like, 7 maybe did it better.
Yeah,
So-
he commits a genocide the first time he's really getting screen time, and then runs away, and so you're like, well, maybe he's just a sadist, but he's weak.
Sure.
But the game does a good misdirect. It's like, this guy is clearly not good, and you're going to need to deal with him, but it's unclear whether he's the primary antagonist. Is Gestal the primary antagonist? Is Leo? Who even knows?
Yeah, I mean, like, spoilers for, like, you know, whenever we get to it, this recording, but, like, he gets fucking arrested.
Yes.
Like, in the course of this, like, there's no reason to suspect the thing, right?
Yes, the thing that will happen.
There's something to be said about how, within the context of this game, if you were to find a way to live under a rock and not know what happens, that payoff is amazing.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
we will get there.
Square, being Square, has commoditized it, much like the death of Aerith. So if you try to approach these games for the first time, it is likely something that you see coming.
Sure. So after, Doga gets poisoned, Cyan tries to find Kefka to fight him in single combat because he is the Steiner of this game. He is an honorable knight whose ways are way fucking out of date for what's going on.
And a man out of time.
He is fighting like dudes in mech suits in single combat, and Sabin's like, hey, you need help. So you and Shadow, if Shadow's still there, or you and just Cyan and Sabin, if Shadow has decided to peace out, fight several encounters until you get Kefka kind of isolated, and then every time you try to fight him, he runs away. And you try to pursue into a forest. Shortly after, Kefka escapes, but you then kind of go to a forest nearby. And the forest is the Phantom Forest, which is, I mean, it's got some, like, the environment change. It, like, you enter one way and then, it becomes an exit. It's got some Mystery Forest vibes, which they repeated in 9, in the Black Mage Village sort of deal. And eventually, when you find your way through this maze, you get to the center where there is a train, the Phantom Train, which is taking people who have recently departed to the afterlife. This is the train to hell, and apparently it starts at some random forest.
Oh, this entire sequence is so good. It's got an innate tension. It's got a great sense of pace. The combat here is actually, it teaches some core mechanics with Cyan. There are easy outs because all of these characters that you're fighting are undead. And it's a beautiful level. I just really like just navigating the train, playing around with different characters. You can even recruit a little ghost dude. It's a fun time.
Yeah. A memorable plot sequence in this game. It is unfortunate that out of the playable characters in this game, Cyan has perhaps the shittest unique mechanic.
He's probably the worst. So his mechanic, he's got a unique weapon. He uses katanas. He uses heavy armor, and his mechanic basically,
you just select it and wait for it to charge up.
Yes, he's got multiple numbers where the longer you charge, you get a different move. So his first move is Fang. It's just like the rapid punch that Sabin has. It's just an enhanced physical attack, but you don't get to pick who he uses it on. His level 2 move is a counter attack. So if he gets hit, he will counter and deal a ton of damage. And then his level 3 is it just like multiple strikes, but they're weaker than normal.
He spreads it. No. It's weaker depending on how many characters are on the screen. It's multiple attacks, maxing out at 4 or 5. But if there are 4 or 5 characters on the screen, then it's one shitty attack each. This is also where if you pair up the Genji gloves with Cyan, which we'll talk about the relics in a little bit, it's actually pretty decent.
Yeah.
It's a shame because I think his design is cool, and I think Cyan has one of the best individual story arcs. Like, his story and his character arc is probably one of the better in the entire game. Yeah. And I want to investigate and learn more about his past, and I want him to get the conclusion to his story. It's just I absolutely hate playing with him.
Yeah, I mean, any mechanic that just requires you to stand still and not do anything, and even in, like, weight combat, your enemies will just wail on you while you're waiting for that to charge up.
Why would it sort of exacerbates, like, problems that I think the series dealt with almost from the beginning, certainly from, like, 4 forward. That I have that Tim Rogers fucking video series on my brain, but his whole thesis of like Final Fantasy VII Remake being like proof basically that Square has been wanting to make Gears of War for a very long time, and now they can just do it. Which maybe that's stating it a little thick, but like
Sure.
Kingdom Hearts, like they want to make action games, and this like takes what is already kind of like abstract and then adds this whole extra layer of like waiting for shit on top of it. Like it's kind of bafflingly bad.
I like the kind of implication that Cyan is just kind of standing there with his hand on his sword in its sheath, waiting to do his super move. So he just has to wait, and he's just charging like, I don't know, in
Like a
DBZ or
goober.
something.
Yeah. It's a rich flavor. It has like a Kurosawa fucking samurai flavor, I guess.
Yeah.
But it just sucks for practical combat. Like, why
And
would
it's
you do
really
that?
weird when you compare him to like a character like Sabin, his core mechanic is very involved, requires like fighting moves.
Yeah,
and
dynamic feeling.
It's dynamic feeling, and it's kind of like a prototype to what they ended up doing with the special character moves in Chrono Trigger.
Kind of, but the Sabin thing is like the game waits for you to put in the commands. Cyan's thing is like you press a button and then you get to the number and hope they don't kill you before you get to the number.
I think that cuts to the heart of it. Like Cyan, the game is you are waiting for the game. Sabin, the game is waiting for you. Like
Yes.
the order is reversed.
And-
They're like opposite sides of a coin.
And even then, like Sabin, it's really cool at first glance to put in the commands, but sometimes I just wish it was a menu and I got to like I'm going to pick the move that I want to do. I can only fuck it up. I can only fail to get the move I want. I don't get like bonus points for doing the move properly. I just
My
get
success
to do the
rate
move.
with Fire Dance is like 50-50.
I know, and
like,
that kind of sucks.
Yeah, I kind of want to plug in a fight stick because I feel like I could make a half circle more reliably on that than on a SNES D-pad.
Can I tell you something? Why my
Sure.
version is probably the better? They found a way to put in 16 directional controls with the arrow keys on the keyboard.
Ooh, so you probably don't fuck up hardly at all.
I have about a 95% success rate, and Sabin was one of my favorite characters to play because I liked the mechanics of his ability.
Yeah, my fucking Fireball Kamehameha move was like 100%. Like I'm pretty good otherwise, but let me tell you that Fire Dance, it's just like a half circle.
Oh
backwards.
man, I was spamming
Real-
Fire Dance for basically.
It's
Burn
a hell of a
Flame.
move.
It was
it's
my
a little-
burn flame because I was able to do it, and I just
Yeah,
that's a
it's-
reference.
It is a crowd clearing. Anyway,
Yeah, it killed everything.
Yeah,
And I
so
even boosted his magic stat to where it was like during this stage of the game he was doing like 1,000 damage per hit.
yeah, I guess it's pertinent to talk about it because this is the like one of the anecdotal things from this game is yes, you can suplex this train.
yeah,
Yeah!
so you fight your way up
It
the
is-
train.
It is like they knew what they were doing when they put that in this game. Like you don't act like that could very easily have been like nope, like you cannot do that, but they chose to let you suplex the
And
train.
he suplexes the entire train. It's not just the front. He grabs the entire thing and drops it.
I mean, I love this fight because you're fighting the engine of the train. Sabin and Cyan are like running alongside it, fighting it. And then they will just intermittently just like, pick it up and suplex it.
Perhaps not anything between this and the fucking Hell House showing up in 7 Remake was like quite as good a visual gag.
Yeah, it's very good. And
Yeah.
like once you defeat the train's like, okay, I'm not going to take you guys to hell. And instead it lets you off at the next stop, which is a stop where it is picking up all of the people who died in Doma. So Cyan gets to see his wife and child's spirits board the Phantom train to the afterlife. And he's kind of tortured trying to catch up to them because he's been left behind. So
A lot of death and murder in this game.
Yeah.
I know when you compare this to Final Fantasy V and even Final Fantasies 1 through 4, although there are darker moments in 4, this is probably up to this point, and it even can be said to this day, one of the darkest Final Fantasy games ever made in terms of tone and narrative approach, like narrative overall.
I want to talk more about this a little bit later, but yes, like But even like immediately, like Cyan's like got a grief process going on, which these characters like I like the story of this game, but I'm not going to sit here and say it's Waiting for Godot. Like these characters are kind of very well done sketches. Yes. But there's a moment where like you go into a town and it's you cruising with Sabin and basically a random dancer lady in a milk bar, because it's the American watered down version of the story, starts hitting on Cyan, and he's like, oh gee golly jeepers, and Sabin's like, hey bro, it's okay, like trying to sort of warm him up. I go back to that moment in my head a lot because it's got a very intimate, like he doesn't know how to process intimacy yet with other people who may be like vaguely interested in this like hot samurai man walking in to a bar. Mm-hmm. And like the translation, it loses probably something. It's not necessary. Like this sequence lasts all like 10 seconds, but it's a glimpse of like an inner world that I find really like meaty. Like it makes me understand the character of Cyan a little better, that like he's not like, oh wow, a dancer. Like he's actively like, Jesus Christ, like
he's
don't know how to handle this.
He's your stodgy knight type.
Yeah, stodgy knight who is grieving a wife and child who just died.
Yep.
And it's in real time.
It is kind of a shame that is a missable scene if you don't
talk
to that dancer. Like there are a lot of character development scenes in this game that are just missable if you don't talk to the right person or have the right combo of characters in the right place.
Yeah. Hey, but I slagged 9 a lot for that
franchise.
Yeah, I shit on 9 for that a lot, and it's bad here too. It's bad every time they do it, and this game does it a couple times and it sucks. So there you go.
I would say is usually in 9 it like gives you an ATE thing and says, hey, look at this.
No, it's not. There are certain. You don't know who Garnet's fucking name is unless you do a side quest, Gino.
It doesn't matter. It's fine. So yes, in Scenario Sabin, at the end of this, we're not even close to done yet. You then end up on the Veldt shortly after this.
No, you fall down the Barren Falls.
Yeah, you jump over some falls to escape.
Which that sequence is also cool. It's just you falling down this waterfall and fighting fish that pop out. It's a cool visual.
And then you end up on the Veldt, which is this big kind of plains, kind of a Sahara, not Sahara, savanna sort of.
Yeah,
scenario.
Serengeti kind of thing. Yeah.
And you will encounter Gao here, who is he's Tarzan. He's a Tarzan boy, raised by monsters. His mechanic is very interesting. It's called Rage. So Gao, once you have to throw jerky at him to get him to join you. You feed him, and then he'll join your party. And his moves, he will mimic the moves of monsters, is his mechanic. He cannot do regular attacks. You have to basically pick what monster he will mimic, and then he will use either one of their moves or attack on every one of his turns, and you lose control of him for the rest of the battle.
Yes.
So he is a very interesting character because you basically get his moves by having him jump into crowds of monsters while you're on the Veldt, and he will eventually rejoin your party at the end of a battle, and he will gain the ability to mimic any monsters that you were fighting when he jumped, and then any monsters you were fighting when he returned.
It's a pseudo blue mage mechanic. I played around with this. I remember in real time I was talking about my experiences trying to teach Gao abilities to Gino while he was streaming Bug Snacks. My overall feelings have not changed. Some of these characters just gain new abilities by leveling them up, others by buying certain things. The more involved characters, fuck that shit.
Yeah, Gao is either the worst character in the game or one of the best characters in the game, and it is entirely dependent upon whether you know which rages you want and whether you spend the time to get them.
I am, generally speaking, the only time I've ever enjoyed blue mages has been in Final Fantasy V. Because I didn't like Quina. I don't like fucking Quina. I don't like fucking Quistis. And I don't like Gao. And I don't like Strago.
Questus is pretty easy, though. You just get some items here and there.
Fuck, you have to buy them from specific dealers and travel around the world, and it's just such a
Just get
pain
them
in
from
the ass
cards
to
really
tell which
fast.
pixel is a store and which pixel is not a store. I don't know. The whole Velt
fine.
mechanic was frustrating, especially considering that you get AP at the Velt, but you don't get EXP. So any characters that are helping Gao get these special abilities, they're getting nothing to show for it. And it takes time, and that sucks.
Yeah, it's worth noting that you're like, okay, it's just one setting. Like, how many can it be? Every monster that you have fought in the game, after you fight it the first time, starts showing up as a random encounter in the Velt. So you can, in theory, just keep going back there once you've got the ability to travel back places as you encounter new monsters and just continue to staple new ones on. That said, pro tip, just get Stray Cat and maybe Satellite, and those two can carry you a pretty long way.
No, yeah, Stray Cat is broken, and Satellite gives him float, which makes him unhittable by the physical
and it makes
attackers.
him immune to instant KOs as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So he picks up the immunities of the monsters and any passives that they have. So if a monster had float, he gets float. If it had haste, he gets haste. If if they absorb fire damage, he will absorb fire damage. If they're weak to fire damage, he's weak to it.
Like, for lack of a better, like, it just basically swaps whatever monster AI routine exists on that monster in for his own, and then he just sort of runs off that. So, all the math of this game has been laid bare for almost 3 decades now. So, like, Stray Cat specifically,
it's 4 hits.
I'll cop to having looked this up. It does the 4x attack thing.
It does
Each
a
one of
4x
them is
attack.
half damage. So you basically at hour, I don't know, let's say this is hour 5, have like an end game Final Fantasy V ability on this character. He doesn't have the gear to really make it sing, but you're not that far from that either. So yeah, as you said, Gino, either not worth investing the time or easy mode.
Yeah, and he also is one of the first characters to get access to group attacks, like powerful group attacks. But the first time you get here, you can get Lesser Lopros, which is a kind of Drake-looking thing, and its special move is Fireball, which does about 500 to 800 damage to all enemies, which is super powerful. Like, you can get Guard Leader, which has Wind Slash, which does a lot of damage to all the enemies. You can get a Satellite, which is immune to one-hit KOs, and it does Sonic Boom, which is a big amount of damage. You can get Templar, which casts Fira, which no character should have access to Fira yet, of all the characters you've got. So, like, there's a lot of powerful things that you can do with Gao, but it just takes knowing this. Like,
It's
you need to go in.
also.
You want to look at a chart, and then you're going to know which ones are worth doing, and, sometimes you just won't run into the good enemies.
Gao is maybe a good character to use on your, like, second playthrough of this game.
Yes.
When you aren't, like, concerned with discovering stuff and you just want to, like, have a good time.
Yeah.
So
when you get Gao, then you're able to leave the Velt. There's a cave to the south where he has buried a single diver's helmet.
So all 3 of them are going to fit in that diver's helmet, right?
They all share the one diver's helmet, and they go down the Serpent's Trench, which is an underwater pathway, basically, that leads you back to the continent where Narsh is. It's easy to die on the Serpent's Trench. There are some enemies there. It's another one of those cases where you're in mode 7 and you have to pick left or right, similar to the river rafting earlier. So if you don't have a guide, you sometimes pick a really shitty path. Sometimes if you have a guide, you're fine.
Very quick pause. The screenshots of the pixel remaster of this game
look amazing.
They look so fucking good, and I can only imagine that all of these mode 7-ish sequences being recreated in that style are going to be very, very good. That, I think, is going to instantly become, like, the preferred way to play this game.
We'll
like
see.
When that comes out. It's a really incredible looking shit.
Yep, for sure. So once you get through the water here, then you show up on Nicaea,
yeah.
which is a town south of kind of by where you can take a ferry to South Figaro, and then
right. And
you
above
can
it,
go-
there's the vendor and the actual city and town.
Yep, you can buy stuff. So once you get back to Narsh, now you've got to deal with defending the Esper that was uncovered in Narsh. You now have access to your entire party: Edgar, Sabin, Terra, Celis, Locke, and you have to create Cyan, and you have to divvy them up to defend this Esper into 3 parties. So generally speaking, you'll want 2 parties of 2, 1 party of 3. Your party of 3 will probably be... Oh, actually, is it 2 parties of 3 and 1 party of 2? Regardless, your strongest party is the one you're going to want to fight Kefka, who's the final boss of this encounter. This is kind of similar to the Moogle encounter at Narsh earlier on.
Yeah.
Except now the characters are actual characters and not just random Moogles. And it kind of feels almost like Fort Condor or something again.
The original version of Fort Condor, but good.
Yeah. So what did y'all think of this encounter? And who did you use to go up against Kefka?
So I've got 2 different answers. Jeff, you can go first.
Now let's hear yours.
No, I
feel
actually
like- I
like
feel
this
like our
sequence.
answers are gonna be pretty similar.
I like this sequence. I think in terms of showing the sense that the Empire is this monolithic, big force that just completely makes your little rebellion look like you're just a kid's eating at the kiddie table. I think it does that job really well. Do I think it goes a little longer than it should? Sure. But overall, I think it does a lot to make the Empire feel like a threat. You really do feel browbeaten, and I was constantly just like almost covered in sweat, thinking, oh my God, I'm not going to finish it. And the only thing I would say that there's a very clear way to place your 3 parties to prevent them from reaching Bannon.
Yeah, there are 3 choke points.
Yep, there's 3 choke points.
Just put one person
I thought
in
it was
each of the 3
very
slots.
funny when I noticed that the enemies can and will go around your characters. They won't just charge into battle, which I thought was a clever little touch. But yeah, I actually used a party of 2 to fight Kefka because, again,
Really?
Sabin, I had no problem performing his fire dance, and I constantly popped that off, and I killed Kefka in 2 attacks.
Was it Sabin plus Celis or?
No, it was Sabin plus Gao.
Oh, okay.
I will say that was my big mistake, is that party was too overpowered, and the party that had Cyan and Celis together was fucking dog shit. And they ended up having to do most of the fighting because I put them on the left, and I'm pretty sure that the left side is favored to have more soldiers than the middle or the right.
Yeah, I mean, my go-to team was Locke, Celis, Gao. So Locke so that I could steal, Celis because she just invalidated Kefka's magic, and Gao because if you just pick one of his good rages, he just murders Kefka very fast.
I feel like the one thing that during this part of I don't feel like there was a lot of good crowd control options, and it really does like to throw like 3 to 4 mooks or random encounter trash, and you don't really have a lot of characters with crowd control options.
Gao, Edgar, Sabin, Celis, and Terra all have some options, but they vary in quality.
Yeah, Edgar's got weird, like, all this stuff seems like I think becomes of marginal use later on in the game, but it seems like almost like there's a big curve where it's like each one of these characters becomes to prominence at a certain point. Early on, Edgar's ability to just like confuse an entire enemy party is very useful. And then,
oh yes, and I bought the poison attack, which is it attacks all characters, so he does damage and poisons them.
Yeah, when he uses biological weapons for good, he does a lot of good damage.
And then eventually you get that chainsaw, and he kills everything.
Yeah, if you get the chainsaw, we'll get there.
Yeah, he's Edgar's definitely a character who in the early and mid game is overpowered, and then in the late game falls off.
No, I actually found a way to make him completely busted in the late game.
I mean, you can make anyone busted, but like his.
No, so basically what I did is I turned him into a dragoon, and then you also can put the dragon horn on him, and so he jumps into the air, and he has the holy spear for me, and he just rains 999 damage from the sky. It's great. Just casting holy, just dropping holy, then bringing death from the sky. So he's completely busted in my run.
Sure. So once we kind of save everyone at Narsh, you get a little bit of a break. You get some fancy items at the Elder's house, and then you get ready to move on to Kohlingen. I think this is also where Terra has her awakening.
Yes.
After the battle with the Esper, Terra goes trance mode. She reveals that she is in fact part Esper, and so she flies away, and the rest of the party has to kind of go after her to try to figure out. And Locke is forced into your party because Locke is the honorable thief. So he's, got to go save the damsel in distress.
Romance in a Final Fantasy game? You don't say.
Yeah, and Celis, it turns out, is the love interest. Locke has, he's just,
Locke's got a lot going for him. He's got a lot of troubles.
Well, I mean, so Kohlingen is where we learn a little bit more about Locke's backstory. And I guess this is where I'll slide in my little sidebar here. So, like, the anecdote, right? Final Fantasy VII is a game about, like, grief and the life stream and, like, people dying. And that's because, like, Hironobu Sakaguchi's mom died. So Hironobu Sakaguchi, the Final Fantasy man, Akka the Gooch, his mom actually died during the production of this game. And I was, A, surprised to learn that. B, the circumstances are pretty bad, I guess. It was a house fire. It was, like, in the home that he grew up in. And he got there in time to see this house, like, pretty well fucking completely destroyed from a fire and was unable to, like, save his mom. So I can't imagine how fucking horrible that would be. But there's interviews of him in the mid-90s talking about making this and Final Fantasy VII, and I think he had taken, and he says as much in interviews, like, he was, and, like, Square was kind of criticized for, like, Final Fantasies 1 through 5, like, being fun games, but kind of plot light, maybe not the most chewy thing. So he's like, well, fuck it, I'm going to try to write something based on that criticism. But then after his mother died in, like, horrible circumstances, that sort of spurred him to do some contemplation of, like, death and grief processes. So, like, Final Fantasy VII, like, this fucking Aerith dies, and there's all sorts of, like, stuff to say about parent death in that game. But this game's got characters who are, like, actively grieving, and I think there's, like, a difference between how Cyan's processing stuff, who, like, watching his wife and child more or less expire in front of him, and then Locke, who's let's call her paramour interest, is in an accident, which is kind of circumstantially, I mean, Locke didn't do it, but she kind of saved him, and loses her memory, and basically pushes him away because she has what amounts to a traumatic brain injury, which is a real thing that happens and is shitty when that happens in real life. Sorry, my cat's yelling. So he winds up leaving her, and then the Empire invades, and she winds up dying as a civilian when a shitty evil Empire attacks her town. And he's paid a weird, like, medicine man in Kohlingen to embalm her and keep her body in his basement. So she's dead, but her body is, like, perfectly preserved, but she's not alive.
Yep.
And I guess the hope is that eventually, the joke is just throw a phoenix down on her, but, like, that somehow he will be able to bring her back to life. That's a complicated grief process.
For
right?
sure.
Like, he's got a difficult relationship with death.
And he's basically said, I'm not going to let a woman I care about die again.
Yeah,
you can see
trauma informs his worldview, basically.
You can see the Zidane to Locke, like, through line,
Sure,
going straight through.
And I'm glad you mentioned it, I felt like this reminded me of the themes of different people dealing with the inevitability of death from Final Fantasy IX.
Yep. For sure.
It must be mentioned that this is all completely missable if you don't do the right things.
Yeah.
If you don't bring Locke there, if you don't go down there, if you don't go to the right building.
There's also a really cool scene if you have Sabine and fucking Edgar and you go to Figaro Castle where you find out how they determined who would be king of Figaro Castle. Yep. That scene's great. The coin toss scene is probably one of my favorite scenes, similar to what Jeff said about liking Cyan. Just realize, oh, wow, wait, intimacy. Now it's Edgar and Sabin basically saying, hey, I don't
one of
hold
us gets
anything
to live the
against
life
you.
we want.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a good moment.
Yep, the missable stuff is a real bummer. But wait, there's more, because Shadow is recruitable here too. And in addition to having sometimes Shadow will just leave you after fights, sometimes when you stay at an inn while Shadow's in your party, there's a possibility that you'll see chunks of his backstory, which are A, good, and B, feature like really sharply different music and like sound design from the rest of the game. Like they're very striking, and they're missable. And it sucks because it's such good stuff. Like there's great moments in this game, and I'm really surprised that they make them missable. I do think that they maybe have gotten better about this over time, but like 7 has missable shit, 9's got missable shit, even if some of it, is hit the select button. Like it's a bummer.
10 has missable shit. 12 has a lot of missable shit.
Like
the only game that gets away with this is 13, because everything's presented to you and you can't miss anything because there's no character development.
Yeah, like
that's
maybe that's the
guys.
Opposite problem.
If you don't have character development, there's no missable stuff.
You can also learn who Gao's father is if you just visit a small hut, kind of when you're with Sabin. You find out there's a guy who like went mad and thought his son was a monster, so he threw him out. And then, would you look at this? You met a wild child running with monsters because his mom died, I think, in childbirth. And so the father kind of went mad afterwards. Like, cool backstories on all of these characters, almost all of them 100% missable.
Yeah.
So after you go to Kohlingen, we're basically trying to get our way to Zozo, which is where Terra is. But before you go there, you go to Jador, which is this town of wealthy aristocrats. It is the Treno of this game. It's all rich people, and they kick out all of the poors, and all the poors go and form the town of Zozo. And this game's politics around this, where Jador is super fancy and you can get tons of great items. And then as soon as you go to Zozo, everyone in Zozo lies when you talk to them. They will also steal from you, and it's random battles everywhere. Nowhere in Zozo is safe.
Yeah, perhaps not the best class.
Well, you see, Jeff, poor people are inherently untrustworthy, and they will kill you at a moment's notice.
Like, there's stuff to be said.
They tried.
Between that and let's just broadly say gender politics of a lot of these Final Fantasies 1 through 10, even in some sense continuing to today, boys made these games. Specifically boys from like a developed industrial nation. And the boys made them in like maybe shitty circumstances, etc. But they reflect some sort of puerile, shitty worldviews at times. And in some sense, like, I think the more technology they had available to them, the more they were able to like weave some shitty tapestries. So yeah, here's a steady, like, all these games, not all these, a lot of them wind up to just like eventually like a major component in a bunch of these games is like someone's just planning on kidnapping a woman, right? Like Final Fantasy VI, we'll get to we're gonna kidnap someone. Final Fantasy IX opens with we're gonna kidnap someone. Like if you stop and think about how fucked up the idea of just like, it's just men kidnapping women. It's like, oh, that's actually one of the worst things that can happen. Like that's a real fucking problem in the world. In this country specifically.
In this
not
game,
particularly funny.
The mechanics of Jador being the wealthy place where you can go to the auction house to get cool items, and then Zozo, they just constantly basically talk shit about Zozo, and then the game's like, and they're right.
Right. Yeah.
Zozo's a shithole. You don't want to be there. It's probably one of my least favorite levels because it's random battles all the way down.
The hopping back and forth thing is very frustrating, and it's not clearly telestrated to the player.
The thing I'll say about Zozo, the environment, is it's like
it's got really good music.
Going through Zozo is kind of a pain in the ass, and the encounter rate's really high, and you're like, God, this town sucks. Until you put it together that it's basically a dungeon. Like, it's basically a giant, elaborate, above-ground, urban environment dungeon.
It is, yes.
And that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
That they were able to like take that clay and turn it into like a new thing. In practice, it's a slog to get through, and again, the politics part is pretty.
Those hill
naff.
geigesses are not fun to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
you eventually fight Dodaluma at the top. He's a monk. He's a jerk. I had forgotten that Dodaluma is so barely in this game because he's gotten so many good cards in the trading card game.
Jesus.
He's gotten 3 different cards, and all of them have been semi-playable. And I'm like, this guy's. You fight him once, and he's just like a pushover?
Are there spirits within cards yet?
No. Waiting with bated breath.
Give me Joe.
Time to Aki. Oh yeah, Hironobu Sakaguchi's mom's name was Aki, and that's literally why that character is named Aki in Spirits Within. There's the coda to that.
Well, once you get to the top of the tower in Zozo, you find Terra. She's still all Esperfied. At this point,
someone's with her.
Ramu.
Yes.
Ramu.
The Esper Ramu is there with her, and basically you get the access to the Esper system, which is the leveling system in FF6, or the way you should, I guess I should say, it's the character customization system in 6.
Yeah.
Espers, it's similar to Final Fantasy VIII in the way you kind of equip Espers onto characters. Once they are equipped, if every battle will give you AP, the AP will unlock the magics that Esper can teach your character. Once they learn the magic, they have it permanently, and Espers can also boost your stats every time you level. Some Espers are there primarily to give you spells, and so they don't have any stat boosts when you level up. Some of them kind of are a mix where they'll give you spells, but also they give you big stat boosts. So you kind of want to divvy up your characters in such a way that, they've got Espers. Oh, and they're also summons, like they're your summon attacks. So you want to divvy them up so that characters are growing the way you want them to. They're getting useful spells, and they're, keeping pace with everyone.
So this, M. Palladino, if you're listening, this here is the juice.
Yep.
Yes.
Like it splits the difference between several other Final Fantasy mechanics, your Final Fantasy V job system, your Final Fantasy VII materia, your Final Fantasy VIII junctioning, which I hadn't really thought of, but yeah. And it's so fucking good. Like, practically speaking, there is no real need to. You could, in theory, play this game such that everyone winds up acquiring every single spell.
Yep.
Which is like, you could do that if you're a lunatic. Like, if that's fun, sure. Like, there's nothing really stopping you. But I think that wasn't what they really intended you to be doing. But what you can do is, as you said, build out a nice stack of spells for each person individually and just hot swap Magicite as you're going. And it's very, very, very fun. This, I can't lie, my forward progress in this game parked for a little bit here. because I was like, yeah, but I'm really close to getting Thunder 2 and like Gear 2. Like it takes a while, but it's probably worth getting at least on one character. So it's like I turned into the worst version of myself.
I will
and was
say
just
that
like, what if I just listened to this Final Fantasy VI combat music a lot?
Right. I will say one of my favorite things is like organically developing character classes that are not written in stone. And I actually think that that is in some ways a different approach to what 5 did. There is no Dragoon. There is no Summoner. There is no Knight. You've got to make them through your own experimentation. And as someone who's one of their favorite CRPGs ever made is Path of Exile, and there's something to be said about Path of Exile's leveling system being very fiddly and weird and overwhelming in even a lot of ways. But like organically developing your own characters based off of the path that you give them. And there's no way for you to do harm to these characters by leveling up and giving them different espers. There's only benefit in terms of giving them espers. But it's like, I'm the one who turned Edgar into a Dragoon, and the game didn't prompt me. It didn't spoon feed it into my mouth and say, this is how you do it. That part, that sense of exploration, like that sense of creative prompting, like open-ended question prompting has been some of the most fun that I've had with Final Fantasy VI.
Yeah, I think 6 in many ways is kind of the ideal format of customization versus inherent character classes or character abilities. The series has kind of gone back and forth between complete ciphers where, you know, your FF5, your FF7, your FF8, you know, the characters
7 especially seems like a massive, well, I mean, let's 7 had to make that sacrifice in part because they were technologically really pushing themselves to where mechanically the game had to take a back seat for the cinematics, for
I'm just saying, like, design, in terms of design philosophy, like, those games have characters where they basically are blank slates, like maybe their weapons or like what row they stand in might be inherent to the character, but how they play and what they do is really up to the player. And then you've got kind of the opposite design philosophy where characters are really one class, and they are what they are, which is you've got 4, you've got 9, you've got, you know, 1 and 3. Sorry, just FF1.
Which one do you prefer, Gino?
Oh, I think that there's merit to both of them, and I think that 6 kind of marries the two. The characters have their inherent ability, which is what they come with, and then you can customize them with magic afterwards. Now, customizing them with magic doesn't necessarily make them all play the same, necessarily, but you can kind of homogenize them if you want to, like Jeff said.
Yeah, to actually get to the point where you flatten them in that way is such a tedious process.
Hassle.
Like that's I think the negative incentive there. I actually kind of wonder, I think ZP said this, but like if there was other downward pressure, because it is just purely like the numbers only go up, but if there was some consequence to either hot swapping or sticking with like an individual magicite for too long, if that would force like some different things to happen, like I don't know. As it is, I love it.
I mean, even if you do it with the espers, even if you try to flatten characters, like Gao still, the fact that they'll all have access to spells, it still would mean that some characters are like locked to only casting spells. Like Gao is still going to play like Gao unless you only cast magic with him.
Right.
And then there are some characters that even that is not an option kind of later in the game.
We're also getting to the point to where the unanticipated legacy of 6 and then partially the PS1 era, which is this franchise has had a real rough go at justifying these summons, which are now codified parts of the Final Fantasy identity. I mean, we get to like Final Fantasy X where literally there's a button where you can click and it basically turn them off. And then you have like Final Fantasy 15 where they're just flashy cinematics that play, and that's cool. And, you know, I mean, back in the day, the actual summons, especially for Final Fantasy VI, meant to have an impact to show these flashy animations that, basically prove that Square was on their shit, right? And then that was to a certain degree true with 7, especially when they made the leap to 3D. But it's starting to be less and less that, and it's starting to be less impactful to pop a summon. It's like, yes, Carbuncle, you're a dog with a gem on your head. Sure have seen that before.
But, I mean, in context, you just need to remember that, like, this is one of the games where summons are probably the most ingrained. Like, Terra is an Esper. The Espers are characters they're like magical beings. They have a lot of story weight to them.
Right.
In later
but
games,
my
they
point
become
is that,
just like items.
My point is that Final Fantasy 13 needing to grapple with summons, it's the most shoehorned dog shit ever. And
yeah, I would say this is a good example, and later games have been saddled with the legacy that 6 helped create in many ways. So once we get through Jador, now we have to find a way to get Terra un-Esperfied. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to try to get an airship so that you can go over to the continent where the Empire is. To get an airship, you need to go back to Jador. You'll learn from the head of the opera house that Celis looks like his lead opera singer, and that Setzer, the world's foremost gambler and airship owner, wants to kidnap his lead singer for dubious reasons. And so Locke and Celis concoct a plan to let Celis get kidnapped and then basically take over Setzer's ship, which leads to the very famous opera scene. Jeff, why don't you explain why this scene is so groundbreaking and so cool?
Let's see. Let me go to my notes.
level good.
Sequence nice. So, like, there's a traveling show where you can go see a bunch of Final Fantasy music played by a symphony orchestra, and the end of the show, whatever else the set is, it is inevitably this opera. So, as you said, Celis looks like a character, and it's a whole setup. I already said my bit about kidnapping women being kind of a gross plot point, and maybe never should have even been kind of okay, but here we are. Haha. This fucking amazing blend of set piece using like the entire guts of the Super Nintendo to put a thing together, because it takes the sound component of the game and makes it the game for a little while. It does the Shakespeare trick of what if we do a play within a play. It forces you to memorize lines for a song and then perform them, which is, not like a fully developed rhythm game or really game thing. But you do have to say lines as a character to music. And meanwhile, you've got sort of like the B plot of Locke is
Ultros.
the name of the man.
Locke and Ultros.
Ultros, who is just sitting in the rafters with a big weight that says 4 tons on it, being like, ha, I'm going to drop this weight on this opera. I'm an asshole.
I'm going to crush that broad.
It's just, as UHF says, don't call chicks broads, i.e. gross, sexist language. But, like, it's because he's an asshole, right? He can do that because he's bad.
He's an evil octopus. He's an evil, gropey octopus.
Yeah. Again, this is still at the point where, like, functionally on the same tier as Kefka. Just, like, all these enemies just seem like goofball weirdos.
Ultros and Kefka both have shown up the same number of times at this point.
And, like, it's equally preposterous in some way to be sitting in the rafters and drop a cartoon weight on a singer.
And we didn't even mention, like, during the Phantom Train, there's also Siegfried, who's, like, a cowardly swordsman a la Gilgamesh.
Yeah.
And, like, this game at this point has, like, 3 different comic relief bosses that keep reappearing.
It's a funny game, and Ted Woolsey did a good job of, I think, getting most of that humor across.
So, like, this sequence, once you're doing, I think the standout part is that this game emulated singing. Like it tried to emulate a human voice singing the notes.
So
along with the music.
Here's my actual note here. Like it's one of the best set pieces that this series will ever have. It is like permanently good. It is like damn near unimpeachable. It's one of the best things that has ever been put onto like that platform. That said, the thing they don't tell you is, I'm a person who bags on the Super Nintendo, is yes, they actually do a really good job of symphony, like string sound. Like the music is very impressive. But then as soon as they start singing, it's like, oh no. It sounds fucking terrible.
Jeff, we've talked about this. The Super Nintendo's sound chip is ass.
I think there's people who did really good work with it, and this is one of the best examples. But it's like someone spent like, you go online and you watch those ASMR videos, and there's people making like 100-hour cakes. It's like watching one of those, and they just make a beautiful, like a 4-layer cake, and they set it in front of you, and they're like, oh god, I almost forgot. And then they just like pull their pants down and just drop like a big fucking Cleveland steamer, just a huge fucking steamy shit on. Like it, I think the synthetic vocals are actually embarrassingly bad. Like it's a bummer because it's like just a real turd on what is otherwise I think like a damn near perfect sequence.
I love how this song
going
is
and seeing it in person.
I was gonna say.
I would just throw in, as someone who's not a sound chip, I don't know how to describe your
purist
level of fervency about this. It works for me. I thought that the voices sound cool because it's a fucking Super Nintendo, and they managed to make it sound even a little bit like a person.
It's technically impressive. In execution, I find it to be kind of poor, but for what they were working with, for like sound hardware that was basically laid down around 1989, it's incredibly impressive.
There's a part of the song that goes into E minor, and it sounds like Creepy Castle from Donkey Kong 64. That's something that got in my head. I can't get rid of it, and I'm really, really, really scared, everybody.
I'm sorry.
But yeah, overall, an amazing set piece.
You have the set piece, and then Setzer, tries to kidnap Celis, realizes she isn't Maria, the actress that he wanted to kidnap. The team explains, hey, we need your ship, and he's like, sure, I'll gamble my life. That's the ultimate gamble. After Celis uses a trick coin on him to kind of gamble to help them. If he wins, she marries him. If she wins, he helps them save the world. So he joins your party. You get access to your airship. You can then, fly around as you want. You can start doing some exploration. You go to the southern continent. You can, do side quests here.
Setzer is bad.
Setzer's a bad.
Sucks.
He sucks.
I don't
his
know why
is slot.
Yeah, and then also I've always hated slot, except when it's selfie. The only time I liked slot. Yeah. I need to hear you two say your piece, because I don't, in a franchise that has a long storied history of doing these Casanova womanizing wannabes, I don't see how Setzer is any worse than, say, a lot of the Casanova wannabe womanizers that this franchise has already subjected us to.
I don't think he's worse. I think that this game has multiple.
Yeah.
Which is different. Edgar is the same. Setzer as well. Locke to a certain extent. It's almost half of the male cast is in some way a Casanova womanizer. So it's the volume in 6, not the quality.
It's pretty bad. Like, the thing I can say, I'm not going to mount an impassioned defense of any of this behavior necessarily. I think I already kind of talked about it. But, like, Edgar is at least when he says there are as many women in this castle as there are grains of sand in the desert, it's kind of like a bloviating, charming dipshit line.
When he meets Realm, he says, "I wonder how long till she's 18."
Okay, yeah, I'd forgotten that. He sucks. Like,
But remember that part where Zidane actually physically molested a female character?
He grabs
yeah, I mean,
Garnet's
that's like
butt once. Yes,
that
happens once.
A series low point from a bad protagonist character. But let's talk about 6, because there's a litany of fucking bullshit in this game. And
I remember when,
as I said,
seconds ago, we mentioned how Setzer kidnapped a woman to try and force her to be his wife.
Yeah, again, like a thing that if you were to show a friend in 2021, there's a non-zero chance they're going to look at that and say, like, that is indefensibly bad, like, shocking, like, morally reprehensible. Like,
on the one hand, Zidane grabbed a butt, but let's think also about how this guy kidnapped a woman.
Gino, shush. Your game literally has an entire Catholic Church approved wedding sequence.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean,
shush.
Final Fantasy IX opens with a woman being kidnapped. Like,
yeah, that's
like,
true.
Like
to save her from a execution.
Sure, people come up with all sorts of logic for kidnapping women.
And Jeff, like remember Cecil, got to pronounce it right, and how he just sits in front of dancing girls all the time whenever you go to town, even if Rosa's in your party. I said this on Discord. I'm going to say it again. Did that bug you? Did it bug you when Balthier and Fran fuck around and are like casually floofing about?
I joke. Well,
Balthier tries to get him some rabbit puss.
Like, look, the entire cast of Final Fantasy XII is a game where Balthier and Fran are just shopping for a third. Like that's
they want
to
do
plot.
A key party.
Yeah, like these games are horny. Part of the technological advances of the series is
my point. This franchise is horny.
I mean, it's horny, but it's very male gaze horny. As the technology advanced, they had
that Wii Crystal Chronicles game where there's actual literal panty shots.
Like as yes, like as the technology advanced, they had more runway to make characters more shitty and horny, and become kind of more reprehensible over time.
I remember Final Fantasy VIII fans talking to me about, yo, if you use the right summon, you can see Selphie's panties. Like, okay, guys, shoot your shot.
And like, I have zero problem with games being horny. The thing to talk about is, again, this reflects somewhat poorly on the group of almost exclusively men that made these games a lot of the time.
That part I will agree. I would like to see a female written Final Fantasy game. I think it would be for the better.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, I would love to see a Yoko Taro take on this series. I will stand by that. But there's also a reality of we know what that would look like.
So now we've gotten through Setzer kind of being creepy. We get to the continent where the Empire is.
Oh.
You can go to 3 different towns that each have been crushed by the Empire. And
did
are
either
occupied.
of you actually get the optional summons at the Tezen auction house to spawn? Because I kept trying and it didn't ever show up.
I did. It just takes a lot of attempts. You have I think a 1 in 8 chance of getting one of them,
man.
a 1 in 16 chance of the other.
I just kept getting that awful chocobo scene.
The Tacobo.
And I just gave up. Are they worth it?
I've not fucked with this yet. Gino, you called out the auction portion of this game being bad. I can't really sit here and defend it.
The auction shit in 9 is atrocious.
I think the auction stuff in 9 is also bad.
Yes. Less bad, but also bad.
Like, nothing in this game approaches Chocobo hot or cold.
Just pecking shit.
Yeah, nothing's as good as Chocobo hot and cold. You're right.
Which, like, I realize you're being you're funning when you say that. But like, yeah, the auction house in this game is kind of a bummer. I haven't bothered to go get those.
It's not a
fucking
huge
things yet.
deal. It's just like every time you walk in, you don't know what item's being sold until you talk to the dude who's doing the selling, and once you talk to them, you're
same
locked
scene
in.
over and over again a lot.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
hated
like,
it in
you
9,
know-
and I hate it here.
Well, in
Like-
9, they tell you what items are going to be up for sale up front, and so you can just leave and then come back in before they start auctioning.
It is
Whereas
an
in this
improvement.
game, you don't know. You're locked in as soon as you.
Yeah, but you know what 6 has in its favor? A lot fewer bullshit mini games.
It's just annoying.
Yeah,
in some spots.
I don't disagree with that part. Also, they're
Yeah.
super expensive.
Yeah.
Right.
Out of curiosity, Golem and whatever the other one is, can you get it in the other world?
No. But yes, you can. You can get it in the other world, and the math on getting them changes as well.
Yeah.
It becomes more likely. So at this point, you can walk around the Empire continent. You can see all these different towns that have been crushed by the Empire, and they tell you, you know what? The Empire is bad. You then go to the seat of power in Vector, which is the capital city. A dude in the returners will help you get into the Magitech research facility, which is a big kind of labyrinthine dungeon. I've had a hard time navigating because like there are conveyor belts you can jump on, there are chutes you can slide down, ladders you can climb up. Everything looks kind of the same and gray in a lot of spots. So I had a hard time not getting lost, and the random battles are pretty frequent. But it does have a lot of good items for you. And at the end of the Magitech research facility, you end up in a chute where espers who have been used up of their magics are thrown down, and you have to fight Shiva and Ifrit, 2 bosses. But since you should have pretty good magic at this point, they're not especially difficult.
Yeah. The storytelling with the espers, finding out these summons are not just sentient, but are almost real people. They are real people in their own world, their own dimension. Makes everything that Kefka does to the espers all the more tragic and emotionally potent.
Yeah, they're magical people. They are not just spells. They're not just summons. And he's basically draining these people of their life force and then throwing them into a pit to die. And when you go down to the pit, it's just full of skeletons.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about how this game commits to the world is dying, magic is dead, way longer than what I think a lot of people remember. It commits to that gimmick for hours, and I respect the game, and I respect Final Fantasy, everyone who made Final Fantasy VI for that decision.
Yeah, like this had me thinking about 13 at a certain point. Like it's sort of patently silly when you, like, a clown throws Ifrit and Shiva into a garbage chute, which is basically like a 16 by 8 square room full of like skeleton sprites, and they're both like, we're about to die. And that brief sequence, A, has more emotional weight, and B, does more to ground me in like the stakes of the world and what the antagonists are doing than virtually anything that happened in Final Fantasy 13 at any point. Like, and we're at hour like 10, like 12, 15 ish. And like
13
like,
wishes it could write a sequence as good as that. And,
yeah, and it's a really fucking minor sequence in the grand scope of this game.
Yeah, and that's why 13, the worst Final Fantasy game, and always will be.
Yeah, this made me the point where I was like, you know what? I think I'm actually fine with where that is. I think I've made it. I don't know if it's worth even the token defenses I've mounted.
So at this point, you have to fight your way up. There are a couple of enemies that do like level 5 death, and that can be a pain depending on where your level are.
Oh, yeah. My characters were level 20 during this level, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, they killed, I think, 3 out of the 4 party members I had instantly for me.
I had level 20 characters at this point. It was messed up.
So at this point, once you escape, you find Dr. Sid, who is the kind of Magitech researcher. Once he realizes that espers are people and that you're killing them, he's like, okay, fine, we probably shouldn't do this anymore. I'm going to talk to the Emperor, and we're going to put an end to this, guys. I know I'm just a researcher, but I've got a lot of sway. So let's see. From this point on, you'd fight, some monsters that are Magitech.
There was that weird moment where Sellers has to pretend to be a spy so as that Kefka doesn't kill her, and then Locke's all like, "Aw, my wannabe girlfriend might be evil."
Yeah, and
you also start to get the hint. Yeah, you also start to get the early hints of something we will talk about next podcast, that there is a relationship between Celis and Sid.
Yep, and at this point you lose Celis. She uses her magic to save you. You escape from the Magitech research facility. You go back to Zozo. Terra wakes up, and you get a flashback kind of showing what Terra's deal is. Her mother was a human. Her father was an Esper. Her mother, I guess the world between Espers and humans used to be opened, but it was hard to find, and her mother just kind of stumbled in because she had given up on life in the human world. The Espers want to immediately cast her out, but Terra's mom basically says, Terra's dad says, hey, this human seems all right, let's keep her. And then after she gets there, shortly thereafter, Emperor Gestal and I think, is Kefka there? Or is it just Gestal and soldiers? I think it's just Gestal.
It's just Gestal and soldiers. No, the Emperor is there.
Yeah.
Emperor Gestal. Gestal comes in, he starts capturing Espers, and we see how kind of the beginning of this war starts. He starts taking Espers to fuel his army, and one Esper blows Gestal and his forces out, and in doing so blows out Terra and her mom. The baby Terra at this point, and her mom. And then they create a wall that will separate the world of Espers from the world of humans.
Mm-hmm. I thought that brief moment where you actually control her dad was a really creative way to do that.
Yep. You get to talk to the NPCs.
Yes, you even get to talk to the other Espers before they... You forgot to mention this. When an Esper turns to Magicite, it dies.
Yeah, they die and turn to Magicite.
Many of these Espers that willingly turn themselves into Magicite to help you stop Kefka are basically committing suicide. But it's good to see that these magical people are real, that they have lives, that they have concerns, that they just want to, make a living for themselves. And the only thing I will say is the whole Terra subplot, we still got a lot more to get with it. The best part about Terra as a character happens after the twist.
Yep, for sure.
But you can tell how Terra influenced what they eventually did with Aerith.
Yep, for sure.
In 7.
So after that section, you get the airship. You get free access to the airship. Before you just like the airship parks on the Emperor's continent. Now you can, start doing side quests. You can go to the auction house. You can get certain items. You can go back to the Velt very easily. After that, you go back to Narsh.
And you get your first optional character.
You can get Mog at this point. And if you get Mog, he's a pretty useful character. You can also get all of Mog's dances, which is...
No, there's mechanic. One that will be missing,
all but one.
There's one that you need to get in the world of... I guess this is a spoiler. In the world of balance, there is one dance that if you are not careful, you will not get for the rest of the game.
Yeah, and it's the hardest one to get, the Water Requiem. You need to go back to...
the Serpent's Trench.
The Serpent's Trench, and you have to jump back in with your diver's helmet and get into a battle there with Mog in your party.
God, I hope. But the real reason why you want to have Mog is not gonna be here for a while now.
That'll be later on.
Once you get that item, God damn it, Mog was in my party for the rest of the game. Mark my words. My words. And if you know, you know. Pointing to the air.
Yep, for sure. So once you've got everything, you try to go to the Espers to free them and ally the returners with the Espers to take down the Empire. There's a dungeon. You fight a bunch of the lava monsters and such. When you get to the bottom, Espers kind of break out from the behind the stones. Terra will call them forth, and some badass Espers break free and start wreaking havoc on the Empire on your behalf, which is a really cool scene. Like the giant Esper sprites flying out, knocking over. Like they make great use of combat screens,
Right.
like the combat screen, and then giant sprites flying over it. There's a lot of times where characters in this game will move around on the fight screens, all wild. Oh, and I forgot to mention, like when you're in, I think it's in the Imperial Palace. It's either here in the Imperial or in the Megitech section, where there's a full-on first-person use of Mode 7 graphics.
Yeah,
Right.
it's when
The
you're leaving
Minecraft
the
minecart.
Magitech facility and you're on
Yeah.
that minecart. Again,
Yeah.
I
One of
can't imagine that looks anything less than incredible on this Pixel Remaster version, which is unfortunately not available right now.
It's just
but will be
such a
very
flex.
soon.
Such a flex to be like, we're going to do a first-person sequence.
Yeah.
Are you in control? No. Is there any reason for it? No.
I didn't
Because
even
we can.
mention the part where you are flying over to the southern continent to get to Vector. There's this, like, as you're approaching this giant, enormous future megalopolis in the distance, it has very Cloud looking up at Shinra Tower. Like, so much of this game feels in a way like this is really diminishing it, but like a dress rehearsal for Final Fantasy VII. But
Yeah, but on
that
way weaker
moment
hardware.
is very fucking cool.
Yeah. So, like, you kind of get this anticlimax because you're expecting the Espers will ally with the Returners and you're going to have to fight your way through the Imperial Palace. But instead, the Espers break free and they are pissed because their friends are dead. And they just go ham on the Imperial Palace all by themselves. And so you walk into the Imperial Palace already sacked, already destroyed. The Returners are just kind of milling around the ruins of this destroyed kingdom. And Emperor Gestal wants to parley. He wants to join forces because the Empire plus Returners might be enough to stop the rampaging Espers, kind of a la the weapons in FF7,
Yeah.
when Shinra and Avalanche ally. And so, these two opposing sides, he's learned the error of his ways. He's not going to do any more genocide. He promises, pinky swear. And so you have to have this parlay dinner with Emperor Gestal, where he basically asks you a bunch of questions. Depending on what you give him, what answers you give him, he will give you better rewards.
Right.
Oh, it's also worth mentioning at this point, he's imprisoned Kefka.
Yeah.
And said, yeah, Kefka's a bad guy. I totally didn't want him to poison all those people. He's got to be in jail.
I actually like the sequence with the Emperor with the dialogue sequence. It seems like a really creative way to do dialogue choices without, say, the BioWare formula of color coding it. Blue is the good guy choice. Red is the bad guy choice. Like, you have to kind of do a little mental and diplomatic calculus in terms of finding the most diplomatic answer for each of his questions. And it does actually good to foreshadow that he's more gauging you and the Returners rather than genuinely offering peace.
Yeah. Yet another really innovative, clever sequence in a game chock full of them. Oh, love it. Love it, love it, love it. Love how they pulled this off.
Yeah, and there's this cool sequence where you have to talk to all these soldiers and you have to convince people that peace is available.
And some of them fight you.
Yep, some of them fight you, which is a bummer. After this, you get the Albrook, which is a ship. General Leo comes with you. Celis comes with you. And you go to Crescent Island, which is where you're going to meet some of the final unmissable characters. On on Crescent Island, there's a town that everyone seems to know about magic, but they sure act like they don't.
Yeah.
And you meet Strago and his niece Realm. Niece or granddaughter? Granddaughter, right?
Granddaughter, yeah.
Granddaughter.
Strago's a blue mage. Realm is a pictomancer.
Strago was another very similar to Gao was, I got to put a lot of work in order to make you even marginally usable in combat. Fuck that. Realm is a little bit different because her base stats are ridiculous. She has like the highest natural magic stat in the game, and she has access to some of the better defense equipment in the game. You can put the cat ear hood and the behemoth suit on her, and that makes her kind of a tanky magic caster and one of the better persons to give quakes, and ultimas to in the late game.
She is the character who most benefits from the flexible character building. Like the blue magic for Strago, he comes with Aqua Breath, which is really good for some of the force sequences. Like
yes, he's very good for
from a burning mansion.
He's very good for the multiple sequences where he was required in your party. The problem with that is that the fiddly nature of how blue mages work in this game. He not only needs to be in the battle and not die during the battle, he needs to see the move perform. And much like Final Fantasy V, you are better off served to look up where all these abilities are and where all of these special monsters are. With Strago, I would say mechanically, Strago is a little bit easier to wrap your mind around. He just needs to be in your party and see the ability performed. Whereas Gao, you literally need to stick to this very specific part of the map and fight enemies in a very specific part of the entire world.
Yeah, and Strago, I mean, his problem is that
there's two blue mages.
Just you get him so late in the game, and if you've invested in Gao, why would you invest in Strago again when it's kind of they do a lot of the same moves?
Yeah, it's a little bizarre, but and you know, like I guess they're shades of the Final Fantasy V grandfather granddaughter pairing going on here.
Right. Yeah. Yep. So what were your both of yours party composition? Even let's say not necessarily where we're going to stop for the podcast, but where did you? I do feel like this game more so than let's say other Final Fantasy. It benefits from you sticking to a collection of characters longer versus say distributing your attention equally. Because I was classic Terra, Edgar, Locke, and then it was a rotation between Realm and Mog in the last slot. Obviously, I'll guess it's okay to say Mog disables random encounters, and that's a fucking godsend.
Yeah, in the after world, which
yes.
I think we'll kind of call it around this area.
Sure.
I think we'll discuss the floating continent more in the next podcast. But
if I want to do damage, my party was Locke, Edgar, Terra, Realm.
I had Locke. At this point, Locke, Edgar, Gao, Terra. There's an argument for replacing Edgar with Sabin or Terra with Sabin. Like, Sabin's very powerful.
Like I said, for me, Edgar was a Dragoon, and he rained death, which at least his spammy bullshit broken strategy is visually different than, I'm going to give him the Genji glove, and he's going to attack 4 times. It's just the same thing that I've already seen, but 4 times. I liked finding those combinations. How about you, Jeff?
Jeff, what was your...
I am a Terra, Locke, Edgar, Sabin. My spouse has chosen different names for all these characters, so I had to sit and chew on that for a little bit. So
I will say that is the combination to pick if you want to maximize your optional sequences. Sabin, Edgar, Locke, Terra. Sometimes you will want to swap in Celas if you want some optional sequences. But yeah, that's the party to pick if you want to almost guarantee that you see all of the good shit. Like there's a weird, funny scene before you go to the magical town where if you go to the airship, you get to see a fun scene where Sid shoots the shit with Setzer about how to best fix his ship, and Setzer's like, don't want to hear it. It's like, you could get rid of the casino, you could put an extra engine, and he's like, nope, not listening. That's fun. And there's other optional stuff here that is quite good.
And in Thamasa, you are forced to have Shadow in your party, and weirdly enough, Shadow's dog, who hates everyone, seems to like Realm. Weird.
Yeah.
There's probably nothing to that.
Nope.
There's also a ring in Realm's room called the Memento Ring that can only be equipped by 2 characters, Realm and Shadow. And it says in its description, it's a ring empowered with the protection of a mother's love.
Right. I wonder
Probably
why.
nothing going on there.
Man, I know that Jeff mentioned it. Getting Shadow's story sucks.
Yeah, I like so many of the.
I've missed some
I'll back that
stuff,
up a little bit.
and it sucks. Also, I just don't like him. I mean,
you got burned on him so early. That's the thing. That sucks that happened. So I can't take that away.
The funny thing is that, you know what this reminded me of, Jeff? A game that you and I have played, but not Gino. Reminds me of the ninja in Final Fantasy III, where you just throw ninja stars and bring complete total destruction. But you save those ninja stars. You save those fucking ninja stars.
Yeah, and that is what Shadow is here for too. So I think we'll leave it at Thamasa. We've got Realm, we've got Strago. Some big stuff happens shortly after this that changes the whole dang complexion of this game. At the mountains outside of Thamasa, and the floating continent shortly thereafter. So I want to save it because we have a ton to discuss there, I think, when the game goes full mask off.
Yeah.
So
Game
I think we'll...
good. Oh, here's a funny story. I told Gino this. Jeff, I found a classic scan of a Nintendo Power magazine. Apparently, a lot of people in the United States rage quit this game. They rage quit this game at the Vargas boss because they didn't know you needed to perform that blitz maneuver on Vargas in order to get past that battle, and they kept clicking attack, and they thought that the game was broken and kept sending letters to Nintendo Power saying, my game is busted, please tell Nintendo to replace it.
Mystic Quest seems like a very patronizing, not great game, but there's a reason it existed.
Yep.
One hopes that someone learned something.
For sure.
Yeah, that's quaint.
I think for next time we'll discuss everything.
I think we're going to finish this game, right, gentlemen?
We'll try and finish it. Let's see, because World of Ruin has a lot of optional stuff,
right?
And it's got a lot of content. So let's see how much we do and how much we get through. But it will definitely be at least 1 or 2 shows till the end of the game. Either end of the game next time or a bunch of World of Ruin discussion, and whatever doesn't fit into one show, we'll put on a second show and end of game. So we're most of the way through, gentlemen. The temperature taking FF6. How are we feeling so far? Final thoughts.
Game good.
Jeff.
I like again. It's a 13 comparison, but there's other games in the series too. But constantly going back to the characters in your party are like the locus of change in the world. Even the more cosmic shit with the espers and whatnot, it's Terra's one of them. Everyone's kind of bound to events in the world as opposed to it's in a data log or whatever the fuck. Does a great job of making you get invested in these characters and wanting to see them succeed.
Wouldn't we all agree that this is a very grindfathery game? If one were a grindfather, Gino, I think that
there's
you would
a lot to do.
There's a lot to do.
Yeah, I'm falling victim between that and then my spouse being out watching pets right now. I've not touched this game in a little bit because I kind of want to play it with them. But I kind of want to just keep grinding, because I could just do that. I could just grind espers.
The game won't stop you.
I know. It's like a gross part of my brain, but it's like, yeah, but you could.
You
All
know.
right, well,
Yeah, I'm sorry. Just keep going.
Oh, no.
Gino,
Thank
say
you,
your bit.
everybody, for joining us. Reminder, you can get in touch with the show at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have our comment sections and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. You can also support the show at patreon.com/deeplistens. Let's get to those incentives that ZP and Jeff outlined at the beginning of the show, because that sounds like a good time.
It's gross.
Let's get Jeff wearing a Chrono Cross wig and singing about.
Let's have Gino join. We gotta get Gino. I'm gonna call you out. We gotta get you on this off the deep end. Like, we gotta let you. Technically, you should be able to pick a game. We already know what you want to play.
I don't know if Eternal Sonata counts on off the deep end or if it's a main show.
I thought it was gonna be that fighting JRPG that you liked.
Oh, Legend of the Guy is too good of a game for you slobs.
Fucking asshole.
Well, we could do that. That's another option. Well, thank you everyone for listening and joining us on our family table, enjoying our fine meal at the beginning of the show. Till next time, peace.